Fear is a master of disguise. It rarely appears as panic or trembling hands. It comes quietly, whispering caution, reason, and hesitation. It tells you you can't, not because it knows your limits, but because it wants to protect you from failure, rejection, or pain. Fear is not the voice of truth, it's the voice of preservation, but preservation, when worshipped too much, becomes a prison. The tragedy is that most people live inside that prison, mistaking its walls for the boundaries of reality itself. They call their fears facts, their doubts logic, and their inaction wisdom, yet what they've really done is surrender to an illusion built by fear. The illusion of limitation is subtle because it feels real. You don't see it as an illusion, you feel it as truth. When fear tells you that you're not good enough, that others are better, or that failure would destroy you, your nervous system believes it. Your body tightens, your heart races, and your thoughts begin to spiral. In that state, the imagined barrier feels just as solid as a physical wall. This is how fear manipulates perception. It blurs the line between imagination and reality until you cannot tell the difference. You stop trying not because you can't, but because you've been convinced that trying would confirm your worst fears about yourself. Every human has faced this psychological mirage. You might want to speak up in a meeting but feel your throat close. You might dream of starting something meaningful, but convince yourself you lack resources or time. You might crave deeper connection but fear rejection. In every case, it's not the world stopping you. It's fear pretending to be reality. It builds a fog in the mind so thick that you can no longer see your own capability. You end up mistaking the fog for the landscape, and so you settle for less than what you're capable of. The real limitation is not external, it's internalized belief, a belief born from fear. The irony is that fear often grows strongest in the very places you could be most powerful. It targets your potential because potential threatens it. Fear's goal isn't destruction, it's control. It wants to keep you predictable, manageable, and safe, but safety without growth is decay. Every great life demands a moment where you look that illusion directly in the eye and see it for what it is. A projection, not a fact. When you expose fear to light, it loses its substance. The wall that once felt immovable dissolves, revealing that it was never a wall at all, just a shadow cast by your own mind. Freedom begins when you understand this truth. Most of your limits are self-imposed. They exist not because the world has placed them there, but because fear has tricked you into believing they do. The moment you act in defiance of that illusion, even a small act of courage, you reclaim your agency. Every step you take through fear tears a hole in the veil that once defined your world. On the other side of that veil is not safety, but something greater. Authenticity, strength, and the realization that the limits you once feared were never real. Fear builds illusions, courage destroys them, and in that destruction you find who you truly are. The human mind is a remarkable defense mechanism. It doesn't simply respond to reality, it shapes it. When pain, loss, or failure threaten to overwhelm us, the mind steps in not with truth, but with protection. It bends perception to shield us from discomfort. It whispers rationalizations, creates excuses, and builds comforting stories to make the unbearable feel bearable. But this protection comes with a price. It distances us from reality. The mind's first instinct is not to help us grow. It's to keep us safe. And often, safe means small, limited, and disconnected from the uncomfortable truths that could actually set us free. This deception is not malicious, it's biological. The mind is wired for survival, not truth. When it senses threat, whether physical or emotional, it releases waves of justification to stop us from taking risks. It might say, "You're not ready yet," or "This isn't the right time," or "You don't really want that." These phrases sound reasonable, but they're subtle lies designed to keep you from confronting fear. The mind doesn't distinguish between the fear of a tiger and the fear of rejection. It simply reacts. It pulls you back into the comfort zone, convincing you that retreat is wisdom. In that sense, the mind becomes both your guardian and your captor. It keeps you alive, but it also keeps you from truly living. This deception deepens because it hides beneath the appearance of intelligence. You think you're being careful, strategic, even mature. But what's actually happening is a sophisticated form of self-sabotage. The mind constructs narratives that justify avoidance. You might say you're waiting for the right opportunity. But what you're really doing is waiting for the feeling of fear to disappear. And it never will. The mind uses reason as camouflage for fear. And so, without realizing it, you build a life around protecting your fears instead of confronting them. You become the architect of your own cage, decorating it with the language of logic. The true test of growth, then, is not comfort but confrontation, recognizing when your mind is lying to you in the name of protection. When you feel resistance, anxiety, or the urge to escape, that's not always intuition. Sometimes it's deception. The mind would rather keep you trapped in a known pain than expose you to the unknown possibility of change. This is why so many people repeat the same mistakes, stay in the same jobs, or hold on to relationships long after they've expired. It's not stupidity, it's the mind's addiction to safety. The familiar illusion feels less threatening than the unfamiliar truth. Freedom begins the moment you stop believing every thought your mind produces. The mind is a tool, not a master. When you start questioning its narratives, when you say, maybe this fear isn't truth, maybe it's just protection, you begin to separate yourself from illusion. You start to see that growth requires stepping beyond the deceptive comfort of your thoughts and into the raw uncertainty of life itself. The mind protects through deception, but the soul evolves through exposure. Only by dismantling the lies meant to keep you safe can you uncover the reality that makes you strong. Truth doesn't destroy you. It rebuilds you. But you have to be willing to let go of the comfortable lies your mind tells in the name of safety. Truth does not arrive gently. It does not whisper its way into your life. It breaks through resistance like light tearing through darkness. The human spirit is wired to avoid pain. Yet truth often hides within the very experiences we fear to face. We want truth without suffering, clarity without chaos, growth without discomfort. But that is not how reality works. Truth demands confrontation, because only in confrontation do illusions lose their power. When you confront something, your fears, your failures, your guilt, your past, you expose it to the light of awareness. And what was once powerful in the shadows begins to dissolve in the presence of honesty. Confrontation is not about aggression, it is about courage. It means standing face to face with the things you would rather ignore. It's the moment you stop distracting yourself with noise, with busyness, with excuses, and decide to look at what's real. Most people spend their lives running from themselves, mistaking movement for progress. They chase distractions because silence forces truth to surface. But growth begins when you stop running, when you say, I will face this. You reclaim control over the story of your life. The confrontation you avoid today becomes the weight you carry tomorrow. Only through facing what's hard can you become what you're meant to be. The beauty and pain of confrontation is that it destroys illusions. When you face the truth about who you are, you also face the death of who you pretended to be. That's why it hurts. The lies you told yourself, the excuses you made, the false security you clung to, all begin to crumble. But in their place, something real emerges. Authenticity is born not from comfort, but from collapse. The false self dies so the genuine one can rise. And that rebirth only happens when you stop protecting yourself from reality. Confrontation strips you bare, but that nakedness is what makes you honest, and honesty is the foundation of strength. People often think confrontation means conflict with others, but the deepest confrontation is always internal. It's not about arguing with the world. It's about facing your own hypocrisy, your own avoidance, your own weakness. When you hold a mirror to your soul and refuse to look away, you begin to see where you've lied to yourself. That realization can be devastating, but it's also liberating, because once you see the truth, you can no longer be manipulated by illusion. You become grounded in something deeper than emotion, deeper than fear, the reality of who you are and what must be done. The paradox of truth is that it first destroys, then heals. It breaks your pride, your fantasies, your delusions, but only to make room for clarity, humility, and purpose. Every confrontation you face pulls you closer to authenticity. The more you face, the freer you become. Truth doesn't punish, it purifies. It removes the weight of pretending, the exhaustion of avoidance. When you stop fearing confrontation, life begins to open up. You start to realize that what you were running from was never as terrifying as the prison of self-deception. Truth emerges through confrontation because confrontation is the fire that burns illusion, and what survives that fire is real. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to be ruled by it. Fear will always exist. It's hardwired into our biology. But courage is the force that prevents fear from becoming a dictator in your life. Where fear creates illusion, courage reveals reality. It is the act of stepping forward when every part of you wants to retreat. And in that step, however small, you begin to see that most of the barriers you believed in were never real. Courage doesn't erase illusion in a single moment. It dismantles it piece by piece, through action, through struggle, through truth. Every courageous act reclaims a fragment of your mind from the domain of fear. Illusion thrives on inaction. The more you wait, the stronger fear becomes. The longer you stay silent, the louder the voice of doubt grows. Fear feeds on avoidance. It multiplies in the shadows of hesitation, but the moment you move, when you act despite the trembling in your chest, the illusion starts to weaken. Reality begins to correct itself. You realize the monsters you feared were mostly made of your imagination, inflated by hesitation and the stories you told yourself to justify it. Courage is not grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, "I'll try again." It's a quiet rebellion against the lie that fear is in control. Courage also exposes the truth about who you are. Most people believe they need confidence to act, but the truth is, confidence comes after action, not before it. Courage is the bridge between fear and confidence. It teaches you that your capacity is far greater than your comfort. When you take a risk, when you confront what terrifies you, something inside reorganizes itself. Your mind begins to understand that fear is survivable. And once you survive fear, you stop worshiping it. You begin to see that the pain of discipline is temporary, but the pain of cowardice is permanent. Courage transforms fear into fuel. It turns anxiety into awareness, resistance into resilience. Courage, by its nature, demands sacrifice. You must be willing to give up something: your comfort, your certainty, your reputation, or your illusion of control. And yet, it is through that sacrifice that you reclaim your soul. Because illusion thrives in safety, but truth thrives in vulnerability. When you step forward into the unknown, you're declaring, "I value truth more than comfort." That declaration reshapes your psychology. You stop asking for the world to be easy and start demanding that you be strong. That shift from protection to participation is what makes courage transformative. It's not just bravery, it's alignment with reality. The more courage you practice, the more illusions fall away. You stop believing the stories of limitation. You stop identifying with the voice that says you're not enough. You start seeing life for what it is, not a series of obstacles meant to crush you, but a training ground for your evolution. Courage expands your world because it expands you. It is the medicine for every illusion fear creates. And once you understand this, you realize something profound. The opposite of fear isn't peace, it's action. The antidote to illusion isn't knowledge, it's courage. Because only through courage do you step beyond the fantasies of fear and into the reality of who you were always meant to become. Freedom is not found in the absence of fear. It is found on the other side of it. Most people misunderstand freedom. They think it's about doing whatever they want, living without constraint, or escaping discomfort. But real freedom is internal. It's the ability to act with integrity even when fear is present. Fear is the veil that separates potential from reality, truth from illusion, and the person you are from the person you could become. It clouds judgment, limits imagination, and traps the soul in a loop of hesitation. You cannot destroy fear, but you can pass through it. And the moment you do, you realize it was never as thick or impenetrable as it once seemed. The veil of fear is woven from stories about failure, rejection, loss, and inadequacy. These stories gain strength not because they are true, but because you believe them. The mind recycles old pain, turning it into prophecy. It happened before. It will happen again. Fear convinces you that safety is the highest virtue, that comfort equals peace. But peace bought through avoidance is not peace, it's paralysis. The world outside your fear remains invisible until you confront it. You live within a shrinking circle, calling it reality, while the vastness of your potential waits just beyond your self-imposed boundary. The tragedy is not that fear exists. It's that we mistake it for truth. Crossing the veil of fear requires faith, not blind belief, but faith in your capacity to endure. Freedom does not come to those who wait for fear to vanish. It comes to those who walk through it trembling. When you face your fear, you take back authorship of your life. You stop being a character in fear's story and become the writer of your own. Every step forward rewrites your identity, from the one who hides to the one who dares. You realize that the fear you avoided for years was not protecting you. It was imprisoning you. What lies beyond is not just relief, but a sense of power that can never be taken from you, because it was forged in fire. Freedom, in its purest form, is the recognition that fear will always whisper, but it no longer commands. You may still feel its presence, but it becomes background noise, not a steering force. The person who walks through fear learns something the comfortable never will. That uncertainty is not the enemy, it's the teacher. On the other side of fear, you don't find perfection, you find clarity. You see the world as it is imperfect, unpredictable, but real. And in that reality, you discover that freedom isn't about control. It's about surrendering to truth without losing your strength. When the veil finally lifts, you realize that fear was never trying to destroy you, it was trying to reveal you. It was the test that separated the superficial from the authentic, the weak from the willing, the dreamer from the doer. Beyond that veil lies not a world free of struggle, but a self free from illusion. The mind quiets, the heart expands, and for the first time you see life clearly, not as something to be feared, but as something to be lived. Freedom is not given. It is earned, one confrontation at a time. Every moment you choose courage over comfort, truth over illusion, you move closer to the place where fear can no longer dictate your destiny. That is where freedom begins beyond the veil of fear.